let's continue on with your questions.
Okay, well,
we have a lot to talk about.
Yeah, definitely, absolutely, and I would love that. First, I would like to thank you for being here, for taking your time. I know that you have a busy life and you have plenty of things to do, but this
Not
is
really. We are enjoying this.
that's
we're looking
wonderful.
forward to it.
I don't know if we could start with Gloria. Where were you born?
Ladies first,
Okay.
right?
Yeah, ladies first.
So
Well, why not?
Well, because it's
Oh, right.
that's
right.
sexist.
Oh, you think that's sexist?
Yeah.
Well,
How
never.
would you choose? You
I'm,
have to say,
by the
okay,
way, I'm only kidding.
Yeah, I know.
But sometimes if you open a door for a lady,
It might be sexist
it's sexist.
because you're saying like she cannot do that.
she needs it. Yeah,
well,
she needs
but
the
you're being
help.
traditional.
Yeah,
But
I mean,
tradition
it's
is-
just a matter of courtesy. I don't know because I don't know what happens if I start with you. Some people, oh, why do we have to start with the guy?
There you go.
Right? So it depends on
So
the
in
perspective.
these days of political correctness, it's like you're walking a tightrope, and you might, whichever side you do, you're going to fall.
Yeah,
Whichever
yeah.
side
Right.
you lean to, you're going to fall over.
People are so sensitive right
Yeah.
now.
Yeah,
They need
so-
to stop.
Yeah.
All right. So who's first?
Me.
Okay.
Okay, you go first.
All right. So, tell us about yourself, Charles.
Okay. I grew up in Philadelphia, and then when the Vietnam War came, they were drafting people. You understand drafting?
They were like taking some people to the war.
Yeah, conscripting people to the war. And so the way they did it was they did a rifa, a raffle.
A raffle.
Yeah, and the raffle was based on your birthday.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So, if your birthday was chosen in the first 100, then for sure you're going to go to the war. If they drafted you, then they would put you in the Army. Not the Air Force, not the Marines,
The army.
not the Navy, just the Army. That's the only one that would get conscripts. So, and if you went in the Army as a draftee, then you would go to Vietnam. So, my birthday was number 60. So for sure I'm going. So I joined the Air Force instead.
Did you have a chance to decide on that?
Mm-hmm. See, before I was number 60, so that means soon I expect to get a letter in the mail.
Okay.
But before I get the letter, I can choose to do something else.
All
Air
right.
Force, Marines, or Navy.
I see.
So I chose the Air Force. And the Air Force trained me to speak Chinese. And so for 8 months, Chinese immersion, 24 hours a day, learning Mandarin.
That must have been really hard.
It wasn't so hard. There was a 1-year course, but that wasn't for us. There was an 8-month course that was for us. The difference was the 1-year course, they learned to write and speak. Write it and speak it. Our course was only to listen.
To listen.
Only to listen and to translate.
Oh, I see.
Because our job was to be an interrogator or what we did, my job was to fly near China and listen to their fighter pilots in their fighter planes and just take down information to see where they came from, see how good they were. And sometimes we flew near Vietnam because we wanted to listen to Vietnam, because we also had Vietnamese linguists on the airplane. So while we were listening to Vietnam, my job was to pay attention to the fighter pilots, Chinese fighter pilots.
Oh, really?
So they wouldn't, if they were coming to shoot at us, I could warn our pilot to leave.
Wow.
So that was my job in the Air Force. The Air Force took 2 years to train me, and then 2 years for me to work. So it's 2 years training, 2 years working. My first job was in Okinawa, Japan, 1973. And I was there for 1.5 years. And in that job, we were flying near Vietnam and Korea. After that, they sent me to Taiwan, which was wonderful because everybody in Taiwan speaks Chinese. So I lived there for a year. And then they said, okay, you can either finish here and stay here or go back to America. And I said, let me stay here.
Okay.
So I lived in Taiwan for until 1977, and then the work. My income in Taiwan was not very good, and so I moved to Okinawa to get more income.
And my background is that my parents are both Filipino. They're immigrants to America, and I was the first-born American of the family.
Of the family.
Yes.
Are you the oldest, the youngest?
No, I'm
in the
right,
middle.
I'm right in the middle.
In the middle.
So, and I have 5 sisters and 1 brother. So we have a large family.
A big family. Yeah.
Not like Charlie's family though. He has 14 brothers and sisters.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
That's new.
you omitted that from your background. So I wanted to put that in there because having a big family makes a huge impact on your life.
That's a cultural difference.
It's a cultural difference.
So
well, Irish American, Irish Catholic, and I'm Filipino Catholic.
I'm number 7.
You're both Catholics.
We're both Catholics.
But different. You're Irish Catholic, Filipino Catholic. Same.
But I think the Irish Catholic were a little bit more strict.
Strict.
Right?
In the
Charlie actually was an altar boy when he was growing up.
Was what?
Altar boy.
He served the church. He was the one that
little kids.
Right. Oh, the altar boy. Oh, yeah, I got it.
Yeah. Let's see. So I was born in Key West, Florida, and we only lived there for 2 years. My dad was in the U.S. military. We lived there for 2 years, and then we drove across America. My dad had this red Impala. We had Chevrolet Impala.
Wow.
We had my oldest sister Nina, Ricky, Nancy, me, and Linda. 5 kids and my parents. Took all of our belongings, put it in the car, and drove from Florida all the way to San Diego, California.
Wow.
Can you believe that? No seat belts, no GPS, nothing.
No air conditioning.
No air
incredible.
conditioning. It was incredible.
Yeah.
My dad tells this story about how, back in those days they discriminated against the blacks, the blacks, and we stopped in Alabama, very deep south. Went to a bathroom, and the bathrooms were segregated. White bathrooms and black bathrooms. My dad's brown. Which bathroom should he use?
Yeah, right.
So he goes to the black bathroom, and they kicked him out. They said, "You're not black. You can't use this bathroom."
And he went to the
white bathroom. They said the same thing to him.
Oh God.
So that's our predicament. 2 years old. Which bathroom are we supposed to use? This was Southern America in 1964.
Wow.
So yeah, we experienced that. Then we moved to San Diego, and I was educated in the U.S. School system. We had a very diverse school for that time, in whatever it was. We had very diverse school backgrounds. I had Mexicans, we had Asians, we had Japanese in our school, a lot of blacks. And I graduated from high school in San Diego. And then, before I graduated, I got my first job at a periodical publisher. So I was working at a publishing company doing telephone sales. Can you imagine? 4 hours a day, getting on the phone, dialing on a rotary phone, all these different numbers, and selling magazine subscriptions to people. But I was successful.
Yeah.
I stayed there for 2 years. I was one of the top salespeople working in the company.
So you did really well.
So it helped build my confidence in dealing with people and selling things to people. I think that really impacted my future as an entrepreneur.
Nice.
So then my dad was still in the military. At 18, we moved to Okinawa, Japan. And I didn't think I was going to stay in Okinawa, Japan, but I ended up loving it, falling in love with it, and staying there. So I ended up being a single woman living in Japan, going to work and going to school at the same time, and partying every single weekend. And then I met Charlie.
That was the next question. How did you meet?
We met. I was going to college and taking accounting courses because I thought I wanted to be an accountant. So I ended up working at H&R Block. It's a tax preparation company for U.S. military personnel in Japan. And Charlie was also working for H&R Block. So we were workmates. We worked together.
That's nice.
Radically different.
Okay.
Okay. Before we met, I would eat food from McDonald's mostly.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So that was part of your culture, let's say of your background culture.
I would have a Big Mac, a chocolate shake, and French fries every day for dinner.
Oh, really?
Pretty much, yeah. And then I would go partying pretty much every evening because I was in the I not only did I work for H&R Block, but I also worked for a sales company. So in sales, when you're with a sales company, you must go and after work meet with all of your coworkers to discuss your day. And so we always have a beer or a whiskey in Japan. And so I was doing that a lot. And so I had terrible nutrition, terrible schedule. But I did travel a lot. Mm-hmm. Not a lot, but I traveled a little bit. Mm-hmm. And so that was good. But once we met, then my nutrition became much better. Because
way healthier.
Yeah, because Gloria, California, the California culture is much better than the East Coast culture.
Oh, I see.
So even though she was born on the East Coast, she grew up in California. Mm-hmm. Plus the Filipino culture, plus her father worked in was a chef. So between all of that, Gloria really knows everything about food and how to make it delicious and how to make it so it doesn't make you fat or make you lazy or stupid. Because I was getting fat, lazy, and stupid on Big Macs and French fries.
So imagine what you would look like if we didn't get married.
Yeah, right?
Right. So it made a big difference.
That's wonderful.
I'm not sure how much my life changed from being single to finally meeting Charlie and getting married, but I think that he was a big influence on me because I lived moment to moment. I went to work, I did my thing, I partied on the weekend, and I wasn't thinking about my future. Mm-hmm. But he forced me to think about my future.
Oh, okay.
When I was partying all the time, I stopped going to college. And he said, you need to get back to college. You need to go back to school and get your education, get your degree. He said, you need to think about your future and what are you doing with your money? Are you just wasting it away and spending it on whatever unnecessary things, or are you investing it? Are you saving it? So he forced me to think in those terms. So he was the adult. Okay. Sometimes in our relationship.
Well, and you moved to Japan. How was the cultural shock?
Oh, huge shock. As I said, I lived in a equal family home. My parents and my mom and dad both had equal hats. Mm-hmm. But when you move to Japan, it's a complete culture shock because women are second-class citizens in Japan.
Oh, really?
Yes.
I would have never thought that.
Oh my goodness. It's probably one of the worst, well, not more than Saudi Arabia or those places, but women take care of their husband. That's their role.
That's what they're for.
That's what they're for, to take care of their husband. I have a friend who, her husband would go out drinking every weekend, and her husband at 2 a.m. in the morning would call her to come pick him up. Even though she lived 45 minutes away from the bar, her job was to come home, was to pick him up after he went out drinking and partying. And she did it. She sat in the back seat of the car, he drove. That's how Japan was. Still is today. It still is today.
I thought Japan was more progressive.
No.
Oh no, not at all.
More conservative.
They don't
It's
have
more traditional.
women in
Conservative?
Yes, it's more conservative, more traditional.
Traditional.
Women do not have good position in Japan.
Well, I have a friend who also, she's educated. She has a degree. But when they hired her at one of the Japanese companies, she wasn't in the boardroom making decisions with them and doing important things. Mm-hmm. They had her making tea and bringing tea to the table. That's terrible.
Yeah, it is.
She's an educated woman, and yet she couldn't be at the table presenting her ideas. She was smart. But because she was a woman, she wasn't really allowed to partake in that kind of stuff. I experienced sexual harassment when I first moved to Japan. Men did not care about groping you in public. Literally, like grabbing your ass in public.
Really?
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Well, it's
often.
on the train.
Yeah, but still.
Mostly on the train.
Still.
So they got to the point where it happens all the time on the train. Mm-hmm. Because the trains you're very crowded. The metro is extremely crowded.
Yeah.
So it got to where they finally started putting a pink car at the end of the metro. So you have all these trains, and then you have one car colored pink.
Yeah.
And you have to be a woman to get into that car.
Right.
Because of that.
Because of that.
That's very serious.
But then, unfortunately, because the society of Japan said, "Oh, this is very serious. We must stop it," and so they told the police, "You must stop it. And if you get caught groping, then big trouble for you." Right? So now girls, Japanese girls, would say,
Oh, they
He
would,
"Give me
touched
money,
or I would say
or
that.
I will
Police.
yell that you're groping."
Oh.
So that's the unintended consequences of that.
So you don't know which side, right?
Right. So yeah, that was a shock to me that the women were second-class citizens, and then there was a lot of sexual harassment. Because as a woman, I never experienced that in America. Growing up in America, it was shocking to see that.
And the people who harassed sexually more than anybody are other women.
Okay, that's
Is
different.
that true?
Not they.
If you're a woman in Japan and you don't drive to pick up your husband at 2:00 in the morning,
Yeah, they shame you.
or if you don't,
shame you.
if you
Okay,
don't
I
make
see. I
breakfast and
understand.
dinner for your husband, and if you try to get a good job and become a supervisor
So
or
women
a
are more
manager,
judgmental.
They're so judgmental.
Mental.
And it's not just a homemade lunch. I don't know if you're familiar with the bento
Not
lunches.
really.
Okay, so it's a boxed lunch. And it has a little rice ball, cute little rice ball that's made into a panda. And it's got cute little hot dogs made into an octopus or whatever. And it takes a lot of
It
time.
takes a lot of time.
Every single
Full
day,
day.
a Japanese mother has to make this. I was working full time, and here I had to take my son to school and make him these bentos every day. And because I'm a foreigner, I think they laughed at my bento every day because it looked ridiculous.
but if she bought a
But
bento at the store,
I would have been
they
shamed
would have
even
been
more.
Shame even more because
Yeah.
she bought it.
Yes.
Didn't make it herself.
Yeah, so the pressure, the social pressures
Pressure
of
is
doing
enormous.
things their way was enormous. And it was frustrating for me because I couldn't speak the language
so well.
so well. I eventually learned enough to communicate with the school, with my friends. But early on, Japanese reading and writing could not do it. It was very difficult. I couldn't open up a dictionary and say, what's this word? Because it would be in kanji. It would be in their Chinese print. Couldn't speak the language. If I had a question with the doctor,
And Google Translate did not exist.
when you really had to
yeah.
rely on your Japanese friends to do things like that.
That they would be honest in the translations.
Oh, they would be.
They would be, and they would be. But still,
They're
know,
extremely honest.
but when you're
Okay.
going in for a medical issue, you don't want to have to rely on your friend to translate for you, right? So that was frustrating. And that's always frustrating in any country that we lived in, the language
The
barrier.
language barrier.
I would have to say I did get white privilege there.
Okay.
So they discriminated in a positive way.
Okay.
For example, and in the early days, before the year 2000, drinking and driving was common in Japan. And now it's very strict. You go to jail, but in those days, no problems. Except that you would have to pay a ticket. No bribery in Japan. No, so we would have to actually pay a ticket. So I would come, be at a party each night with my fellow workers, and then I would drive home, and they would have police traps where you would drive and they would make you stop, and they would say, "Oh, you've been drinking," and I'd say, "Yeah, a little bit," and they would see that I was white, and they say, "Okay, well, drive home and be careful."
Well, it's because you were speaking English to them, and they couldn't handle
they were
the
too
English.
embarrassed to admit that they couldn't speak English.
Yeah, I think if you spoke Japanese to them,
Then they
it
would
might
arrest
be
me.
a different story.
Yeah, and
Oh,
I could,
that's interesting.
and I could understand Japanese, but I wouldn't pretend. I would pretend like I couldn't, and they would always give me deference. It would always be they would always give me deference. But other parts of Japan that were unusual, they have community bathtubs. So you go to a place and everybody from the neighborhood takes a bath in the same room.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, but they usually have women on one side. It's
men
it's
on
one
one
big
Room.
tub,
Top.
okay, and they have a little wall between them. But you can talk to each other, and you can, if your wife says, "I need my sponge," you can throw it
Throw
over.
it over the fence and have it done.
And the other thing, of course, is you can never go in the bathtub until you take a shower first.
Okay.
And of course, you cannot wear shoes inside the house. They never let you wear shoes inside of a house. Now it's very difficult for me to wear shoes in a house because I
Oh.
lived there for 30 years. So
So you never wear shoes inside the house?
I do
Pretty
I
much
do
so.
now,
Sometimes.
but mostly no.
Well, and after living for 30 years in Japan, you decided to move to France, right? And why did you decide to move to France? Why France?
Inertia. The reason we decided to move was because we realized we'd been here too long.
Okay.
And it's like, oh, if we don't move soon, we're going to die here.
Okay.
So we must do something.
Okay.
So then where do we do it? And we said, well, our son Matthew is going into
10th grade.
11th grade. So where shall we go? And my daughter was a school teacher in Paris.
Oh, okay.
So we said, let's go to Paris, and she can go to his school or go to her school.
So your daughter was the motive, mainly.
Well, moving was the motive.
I also looked at it this way because we were spending a lot of money in school tuition for Matthew in Japan. And did I feel that that money was being spent well for a quality education? But I knew that that money would be better spent at an international school in Paris where his sister was already teaching. So that was kind of the impetus for me. And it worked out.
We almost went to Portugal.
We almost did go to Portugal.
And
So culturally it was accepted to have your kids out until the wee hours. Culturally it was accepted to have your kids drinking at 16 years old. It was, you sit at the table with your grandparents, you can drink. Or if you go to a bar, or if you go to a cafe, your child can drink with you. It's normal.
it was normal.
Normal.
They are very racist.
Oh.
Yeah.
With? Racist with?
Well, not only racist, but they think that they're the best in the world. We've lived in a lot of countries where they
Well,
think
you have
they're
to
the
think
best.
Plenty
about
of nationalism.
And then nationalism and
the
maybe racist is wrong. Maybe nationalistic. They hate British people. They hate British people. They don't mind Americans. Americans are okay.
Germans.
If a British person tries to speak French, they'll laugh at them. But if an American tries to speak French, they're very helpful.
They will praise them. Okay, that's interesting. So, what would you say was your best and worst experience in those countries?
Okay, I'm gonna go with the.
No, I'm gonna go with it. Okay, so
I
I said a lot of negative things about Japan in my initial responses to you, but there were a lot of positives. People were friendly, and they were very. The country itself was very safe. So I have a story of Patrick getting a $20 bill from his uncle as a gift because it was his birthday. He rolls it up, puts it in his pocket. We get home and he's playing in the yard. An old woman in the village found this.
No. Well, next thing you know is the police knocked on the door.
The police had knocked on the door.
Police came and knocked on our door
and said, "Does this $20 bill belong to you?"
Oh, really?
And I
That's
thought,
really nice.
"Patrick, did you lose your $20 bill?" And he checks his pocket. "Yes, Mom, I lost it." And so the police officer gave the money to Patrick. And then we later find out that an old woman in the village had found the money. It flew away, it flew near her house. She found it and she said, there's only one American family that lives in this village. So she didn't know exactly where we lived. So she took the money to the police station and the police knew
And they
who
went
we
the
were.
trouble to come to your house. And
Yes. Isn't that amazing?
amazing.
I
It is.
love that story. Costa Rica.
Costa Rica. You gonna tell that story?
Oh, this is an incredible story.
What happened?
2 days. No, this is the
next
day.
morning.
The next morning after we had arrived. We had moved from France to Costa Rica.
Okay.
The next morning.
We didn't know much about Costa Rica, by the way.
All right.
The next morning, in our rental house, we had no electricity. So therefore, I had no Wi-Fi. But I needed to process payroll because we were still working at the time. I was still doing payroll for a few people living in the UK. I told Charlie, I said, I need to get to an internet cafe. So he goes on Google Maps and finds one in Turucares. There wasn't one.
Turucares.
There wasn't one in Atenas.
There was in Atenas, but they didn't have it on Google Maps. We couldn't find it.
So we went all the way to Turucares.
This is in 2011.
All right.
Okay, so Charlie drops me off at the internet cafe. I do my work on my computer. I come out of the cafe and I put my laptop down on the ground while we get into the car.
Not only her laptop, but her briefcase with our birth certificates, everything we need for
Marriage
migration.
certificates, passports.
Everything you need for migration.
My life was in that.
Everything is in there. So then we drive back to Atenas, and we come to the Radial Road, and there was a landslide there. So we didn't know that. So we drive all the way up to Radial, and we see the landslide. We're like, oh my God. So we have to turn around and come all the way back to the intersection. And we're like, this is crazy, this country. And then Gloria said, Charlie, those famous words, do you have my laptop? I'm like, why would I have it? She's like, "Oh no, I left it on the curb." So we drove back to Tuna.
No, but on the drive over there, I said, forget it. You know, it's gone. There's no way it's still there. I can't. I said, forget it. Let's just go home. But Charlie said, no, it's possible. Let's go back.
Okay, let's make sure.
Let's make sure. So we go back, and right next to the internet cafe was a little coffee shop, and a woman was sitting outside underneath the bench like this, and she starts laughing. And she looks at me and she points to me and she goes, next door. Well, whatever she said.
Because we couldn't speak any Spanish.
Couldn't speak it, but she told us to go next door. I went next door to the little store, and there it was behind the counter. Oh. I wanted to give the lady a gift or a tip or something for holding on to it for me. She wouldn't accept it.
She wouldn't accept it.
Yeah, and I said, I love this country. I think that our marriage benefited because we probably had more opportunities to bond in our shared experiences of dealing with the various bureaucracies in different countries. Mm-hmm. In Japan, in France, and in Costa Rica. You know, if we just lived in America, we wouldn't have those shared struggles of dealing with different countries' bureaucracies. So we're a little bit more empathetic towards each other, perhaps.
Well, whenever you shake things up, if you have a routine with your spouse every day, wake up, make breakfast, eat, watch TV, you know, go to work or do something during the day, come home, watch TV, go to bed, wake up.
It's boring.
It's boring, but if you move your entire environment from the Champs-Élysées in Paris to this, you know, that's a whole different part of your head.
Right.
And so whoever you're with, now I can't explain to you about the Champs-Élysées. I can't explain to you about those smells and the
I have
people.
to be there.
But she was there with me, so we
I
have that relationship.
Exactly what he's talking about.
And I can't explain to you about Japan and playing baseball, or watching your kids play baseball, or having an all-night party because your neighborhood baseball field finally got night lights.
The other thing that we benefited from, I think, well, I'm not sure about that, but like our language, right? Our language acquisition. There are certain words that we use with each other, and only the two of us know what it means, but it's completely appropriate for that moment.
Yeah, it's exactly the word that you need.
Exactly.
Yeah, because you wouldn't have a word in your own language or not.
Right.
And we can't do that with anybody else, but we can with each other.
Oh, that's...
The word is itadakimasu.
Yeah, itadakimasu is like
Proveche.
Proveche. Itadakimasu. Or bon appetit.
Bon appetit.
But we do like to say itadakimasu because that's what we've been saying for 30 years.
Okay.
Asate.
Asate
means the day after tomorrow.
After tomorrow.
So when it's time to tell her something, okay, the appointment's not today, it's asate. She knows exactly what I mean.
What he's talking about.
And if you said it in English, the day after tomorrow, or if you said it in Spanish, pasado mañana. That's hard, but asate. Easy.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time.
And it's so funny because when I was, after Charlie and I got married and we would go back to San Diego to visit my family, it's so deeply rooted that a woman's job is to take care of their husband. Wow, they expected me to wait on my husband hand and foot. They wanted me to take care of him. They expected me to make his meal, to wash his clothes, to iron his clothes, and they would actually asked me to get out of bed early so I could do things for him before he woke up.
Oh, really?
Yes. Even though when I was growing up, my dad did the cooking, my dad did some of the cleaning. It was pretty equal.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
because it was so deeply rooted, suddenly I'm married to this white man. And they wanted to impress him, I guess. I really didn't understand
No,
it.
I wasn't impressed. I was a guest in the house. I would stay at the house. And so I was a guest in the house.
You were a guest.
So they wanted to give you a guest treatment. I mean,
Yeah, but Carlos, after 30 years...
But there's also the marriage, also the male-female treatment. They would not like to see me ironing him a shirt.
oh, really?
They would freak out. And they would run downstairs and say, Gloria, get up here and iron the shirt.
But I think that they're showing a little bit of preference to you because you're white.
That's possible.
I'm not sure, but it's been going
So
on.
you
It's
think
hard
that
to
it
say
would have been
guest or
different
white.
if it would have been like...
If he were Filipino, it would have been very different, I think.
Okay.
I think because he's white male.
I don't know.
And he does. We can never know.
Yeah, you can never know.
But they
know.
treat guests very well.
Oh, that's nice.
So I was a guest. Now, that was enough to get me great treatment. But
And
even
I
her sisters,
don't like it.
sisters know me very well. from other countries. You know,
They
all of her
visited us.
sisters have lived.
Oh, they live
or-
in different countries. They don't.
Yeah.
Well, I have one sister who lives in Italy. I have one sister who lives in Tennessee, and that's it. They all live in the.
No, but two of them lived in Japan with us,
Oh, that's true.
Oh, really?
and one of them visited us in Japan. So three of them have been to Japan, and then her brother visited us in Paris.
Right.
So we've been all around the world with the family, but when I'm at their house, if I want to get on her nerves, I can say, "Oh, my coffee's cold," and I'll look at one of her sisters.
And they would go and do something about it.
Either that, or they'll tell me.
To do something.
Gloria.
Gloria,
Charlie needs some
Charlie
coffee.
needs coffee.
Or Charlie's hungry. Why don't you make him something?
I'm
He
doing
takes
that just to
advantage
do
of
that,
it.
just to get
He
her
takes
mad.
advantage of it.
Yeah, because the
So,
rest of my life.
I
is
mean,
never...
I'm really bewildered by it because in their own households, they live an equal world. But once they, so I really do honestly think it's because he's white.
It's white. Well, there might.
Perhaps. Again,
It's a
though,
possibility.
See, and that's the thing. You don't
don't
even
you feel like you have to take care of Ed when he's visiting?
No.
Okay. Ed's her brother-in-law.
Ah, all
And
right.
he's Filipino.
Ah, he's Filipino. Ah, I see.
Okay.
Well, that's a difference. Yeah.
It is a difference.
All right,
yeah.
fine.
Okay, so maybe we can start with the
We can
interview.
call it.
officially.
We can call it. Let's come up with a new word. White privilege.
It's a white privilege.
It's not a new word, but it's.
It's an
and
expression.
Do
It
you
would be-
believe? Okay, well, we won't go there, but